that last bar? Okay.
Thank you for the live music, Stacy and Lisa. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Seasons Readings 2023. And if you need a program, we've got them back there on the counter. There are cookies and hot cocoa over here, so help yourself. Don't be afraid to get seconds. And we're all glad you could join us. We've got some delightful readings lined up for you today. And let me see. I should follow my script here probably. So I'm one of the librarians. I'm Craig. I work in adult services. And on behalf of our department and the ACPL, we want to welcome you. We're fortunate to have staff members from throughout the building and across several departments here sharing their talents and time with us for this event. So thank you to our adult services manager, that was the flautist, Stacy, and our information services librarian, Lisa, the violinist, for providing some festive music before we begin. So beginning a few months ago, we talked about this and began searching for a variety of stories and poems that celebrate December. I think we've got an entertaining and interesting mix of both classic and contemporary selections that we look forward to sharing with you today. So for those of you joining us in person, again, cookies and cocoa, and we're on to our first segment. This segment reflects on the age-old holiday tradition, the family Christmas photo. So we are having Elena read a piece by Kelsey Timmerman called The Myth of the Perfect Christmas Photo Family.
Hello, thank you for coming today. I'll be reading The Myth of the Perfect Christmas Photo Family by Kelsey Timmerman. There's a story behind every Christmas card photo, and this is ours. Our car looks like something Santa would drive. It has a red body capped with a white top. Soon the white top will have a green tree strapped to it. At least that's the plan. We're on our annual trip to the Christmas tree farm, where we always hope to get the perfect family picture of our Christmas card. I tune the radio to Christmas channels. I've become the cheesy Chevy Chase dad who tries too hard to build unforgettable childhood memories. I'm about to join the chorus when a little voice from the back starts to sing, jingle bells, jingle all the way. It's our 4-year-old son, Griffin. I slowly turn and make eye contact with my wife, Annie, sitting in the passenger seat. This is a moment. I take my hand off the steering wheel and put it over my heart like an 80-year-old grandma, acknowledging the moment without interrupting it. A 4-year-old singing along with the radio might not seem like a big deal, but this is a big deal. Griffin is on the autistic spectrum. He sings plenty, but not with the radio. None of us move to speak. It's just Griffin singing and the sound of the car dodging potholes on the rural Indiana road. We're 5 minutes into a month of Christmas celebrations, and I can't think of a better gift. Christmas is off to a great start. But things take a turn when we pull up to the Christmas tree farm and it's closed. Not just temporarily, but devoid of life, like the set of The Walking Dead. A cry from the silence brings me back to an end of Christmas magic. Harper, our 6-year-old daughter, cannot deal with this. What are we going to do, she whimpers. We've come to this farm since she can remember. There was nothing fancy about it. The trees were only $20, regardless of the size. You cut it, you carry it, you tape it to your car, all without the first note of Christmas music or a whiff of hot chocolate to be enjoyed. Well, damn it, we're going to make a Christmas tradition out of this, I think. I asked Siri for the directions for the nearest tree farm. It's 40 minutes away. Whatever the opposite of Christmas magic is, fills the car. A cartoon Christmas tree points the way to the new farm. There are lights, music, people full of Christmas cheer. A retired grandpa who looks and acts like he's taken time off from whittling toys for orphans to spread peace and goodwill to men. He gives us a shiny new saw and a Christmas tree cart. Griffin wants to ride the cart. He sits on one of the crossbars and smiles until one of his boots catches on the ground and he nearly falls off. I take him off the cart, and he looks like a drunken cowboy as he tries to walk in the boots that might fit him next Christmas. He wants back on the cart. We try again, and again it doesn't work. He doesn't understand why he can't ride, but I'm out of patience and running with the cart, so he can't get on it. He runs after me. At first he thinks it's funny, but then he starts to get upset and cries as he pursues me. I keep running anyhow. We stop at a tree that's nice, but way too big. Let's do the picture here, Annie says. For some reason, the cuteness of kids' faces is multiplied by 10 if they wear a hat. Annie pulls out Griffin's hat and shoves it down over his ears. At his therapy, he will only wear a hat for about 30 seconds before he pulls it off. Annie has him standing next to Harper and then steps back, snapping the photo. I make funny faces and dance like an idiot behind Annie. Smile, Harper, I say. Look here, buddy. Griffin pulls at his hat. It hurts to smile, Harper cries. She's been dealing with canker sores for the last few days. Only half of her upper lip moves, the other half droops in a pirate grimace. I keep dancing, and Griffin looks at me in wonder of, what is wrong with my father? Annie stops trying and gives me the let's get out of this damn tree. Let's get the damn tree and get out of here. I run ahead with the cart, pursued by my crying autistic son. Remember those scenes from The Lord of the Rings where the Fellowship is crossing some high mountain pass? In these scenes, there's epic music, and the camera zooms in on the travelers' faces with reflections of the trials and tribulations, the wear and the tear that led them to this yet another pitiful moment. That's our family looking for a Christmas tree. I'm running. Harper's holding her mouth as if one of her horrible parents had just slapped her. Annie is trying to grab Griffin's hand to keep him from escaping our family to join another. I don't blame him. All the other families look so happy. What's your name? Griffin shouts and points at a family who'd found a tree. They're wearing Santa hats. Even the freaking tree is wearing a Santa hat and tinsel. They introduce themselves, and the perfect mother asks, "Do you like to take pictures, buddy?" Griffin doesn't answer, but what 4-year-old would? "Yes, ma'am, I'd like happily to take your photo of your family." "I'll take it," I say. The perfect mother and father put their arms around their 2 perfect daughters, and they all smile perfect smiles. Not one of them looks like a pirate. Each picture I snap is more perfect than the one before. I want to take the phone and throw it into the row of blue spruce behind us. Instead, I hand the phone back to her, and they wish us a Merry Christmas. We walk away to the sound of the father's battery-powered saw firing up. Oh, that's right. He brought his own saw. Once we were out of earshot, Annie and I start laughing. It's either that or crying. And then Harper finds our Christmas tree, which makes her mouth take an imperfect selfie with the tree and get a good enough picture of the kids to work for our card. It's a picture where the smiles are genuine, partly because the kids are excited about the tree and partly because I've added singing and dancing with Annie snapping the shot. Weeks from now, 100 of 100 or so people will open a Christmas card from the Timmerman family. They'll add it to the pile of other smiling families, made up of people with canker sores, moments of joy, autism, unreasonable expectations, and a whole host of other things that make life interesting. But are they perfect? We try to make our family photo look like a perfect moment, as if those are the only moments worth capturing. Maybe so, but without imperfect moments, we have no perfect moments. They're all worth remembering. And years from now, when I look back at our 2015 Christmas card, I'll remember Griffin singing and crying, Harper's pathetic pirate smile, and the light in her eyes when she finds our Christmas tree. I'll remember Annie's look of impatience and laughing we share as we drove away from the farm with our green tree on our Santa car filled with Christmas music and Griffin shouting, "Turn it off, turn it off." Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Our second segment is about Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, which begins on Thursday and it'll last until Friday, December 15th. Alan, the program director for our Access Fort Wayne department, he's going to read a remembrance of one particular Hanukkah season when a hospital employee went well out of his way to see that the Jewish nursing home residents he cared for could have a complete menorah for the holiday.
I had a choice to make. Either drive the 90 miles to see my family or go look for an extra bulb. My workday was over and I certainly wasn't looking for more work. Now ought to be my time off when I could drive from the New York City Hospital and Rehabilitation Center, where I worked as a recreation therapist, to the warmth of loved ones in my home city of Philadelphia. "Go home, Alan," a voice was telling me. "You've done enough." But there was something wrong in what I was seeing, in what I had been seeing for the last number of days. In front of me was an electric menorah with an orange glowing shamash bulb and 7 other bulbs radiating with light. For the first 7 days of Hanukkah, before leaving late in the afternoon, I would turn the bulbs so that they would glow, adding 1 more for each day. It was the least I could do. In this hospital, which was ostensibly a nursing home, there were about 1,000 residents, of which around 10% were Jewish. Walking through the hospital, which was about a city block long, it seemed that there was at least a couple of dozen, maybe more, brightly decorated trees and other ornaments for the December 25th event. But for the 100 Jews or so, the only recognition of the holiday of Hanukkah was this one small electric menorah, which was in the recreation room on the first floor at the extreme right end of the building. There would be no lighting with oil or candles, as that was deemed a fire violation. This is why it became so important to me that these menorah lights should shine bright, and that the residents, all too many of whom had dementia and other age-related memory impairments, would have a visual cue that this holiday of religious self-expression and joy was upon them. Thankfully, I was able to organize a Hanukkah party, but that was only for an hour or two, and the holiday is around 192 hours long. My menorah lighting worked like a charm until the aforementioned night, when I was planning to drive to Philadelphia. I turned all the bulbs on, and when I got to the yet-to-be-used 8th one, it gave off no light. My rational side told me that a shamash and 7 lit bulbs was good too. But there was another side of me that was saying that so much has been taken away from these people with this meager acknowledgement of Hanukkah, and that so much has been taken away from them by their loss of memory, that I wanted them to have the correct number of lit bulbs. They deserved at least that much. So I took the long walk down the hallway to the main exit and made my way into the cold, dark night, hoping to find somehow, some way, one electric bulb that would work for this menorah. As I opened my car door, some doubt began to creep in. What if you don't find the bulb? Would all this effort have been worth it? I put those thoughts aside, and as I pulled out of the hospital parking lot, I made my plan. I would drive about 1.5 miles to an avenue with a lot of commercial establishments and look for a hardware store. About 10 minutes later, I found such a store, but they didn't have that bulb. I asked if they knew of another place, and the sales clerk said no. I rationalized that I had made an effort and there was nothing more to be done, and that it was time to head for Philadelphia. But then I had a thought. There's an Orthodox synagogue about 5 blocks away. Maybe they would have that bulb. So I drove there knowing that the prayer service was already finished and that there might not be anyone still in the building. As I pulled up to the synagogue, I saw the 10 or 12 men who had been there for afternoon prayers, mostly retired gentlemen, filing out of the synagogue. I certainly wasn't going to ask them to go back in on a cold night and look for a bulb. My only hope that there was still someone inside the synagogue. I parked and came to the door. If it were locked, that would be it. Everything has its limits. I was grateful when the door opened. Although most of the lights were out, there was still one light left in the entrance hallway and one in the sanctuary. Hello? Anyone here? A few moments later, the sanctuary light went out and the door opened, and Morris Gallant, a man I'd say who was in his mid-70s, came out toward me. Happy Hanukkah, Mr. Gallant, I said, shaking his hand. Happy Hanukkah, Alan, he replied. What brings you here? The service is already over. I know that, I replied. Then I explained about the bulb I was looking for. He laughed and said, we don't use electric menorahs, we use oil. Okay, I replied. It was worth a shot. As I walked to the door to exit, I thought of all the time I had wasted in this unsuccessful venture. I could have been at the Verrazano Bridge by now. I opened the door and felt the cold air of the dark night upon me. Then I heard Mr. Gallant's voice. Wait a minute! There was something hopeful in his tone. I think we had an electric menorah here about 20 years ago. Really, I said, coming back into the synagogue. We may have it stored downstairs. Before I could say another word, he went and found a flashlight and handed it to me. Shine that as I walked down the steps. I was happy to help, but I didn't see any steps. To my surprise, Mr. Gallant opened a trap door in the floor and began to gingerly walk down the steps that appeared more like the rungs of a ladder. I guided him to the best of my ability with the light of the flashlight. I heard him moving around down there, but couldn't see him anymore, and I hoped that the light I was sending down there was helping him. I heard boxes being moved around, then a voice, I don't see it. I encouraged him to come up, but he would have none of it. And at that moment, I realized how beautiful it was, what he was doing, and that something good had to come out of this, even if we didn't find the bulbs. Just that he would make such an effort for people he had never met warmed my heart. Looking for light and wanting light and not giving in to darkness is a victory in and of itself. Even if the Maccabees had not found that pure cruse of oil, the fact that they were looking for it in a desecrated temple was an act of faith. Then I heard his triumphant words, I found it, the menorah. The sound of a box being opened and the sound of him moving things around in the box thankfully gave way to him saying, "I found the bulbs!" In a few moments, he was on his way up. He was holding a brown paper bag, and there was a look of joy on his face that comes when a person knows they beat the odds to accomplish something. However, he was realistic. "There are 9 bulbs in here," he said. "I don't know if any of them work. They've been in here for 20 years. You can have them. We don't need them anymore." I thanked him profusely, so much in fact that he told me to go already and see if any of the bulbs still functioned. On the ride back to the hospital, I thought of how wonderful it would be to see all the bulbs lit. I got to the parking lot and then walked at a brisk pace to the main entrance. The guard there was surprised to see me at such a late hour. I walked that half block down to the recreation room. As I entered and looked at that one unlit bulb, I had a strong hope that a little more light would soon be brought into that room. I approached the electric menorah and unscrewed the malfunctioning bulb. I reached into the bag and took out the first bulb and began screwing it into that 8th slot. There is a certain point in turning where you know that if it hasn't lit, it's not going to light. I had gone beyond that point and had twisted it in so tight that I wondered if I could get it out. But get it out I did, and I knew that 1 bulb down and 8 more to go was what I had. I repeated the procedure with the next bulb, and it too gave off no light. Then the 3rd and 4th bulbs with the same lack of results. I was telling myself not to let this disappoint me. I had done all I could reasonably do. Then came the 5th, 6th, and 7th bulbs with no illumination at all. The 8th bulb also did not work. It all came down to this last bulb. Realistically, I knew that the chances were incredibly slim for this bulb to work while the others had not. But I could not let go of that hope. Would not let go of that hope, and maybe this one would glow. I didn't want to prolong the anticipation anymore, so I took the remaining bulb and started to screw it in. I never got a chance to tighten it, as halfway through the turning, a bright orange light emanated from its center. It had worked. Sitting unused for so many years, it was now bringing more light into the world. I was filled with such joy that I just stared at it and smiled. For how long, I do not know. In my heart, I thanked God, and I thanked Mr. Gallant, and I was so happy for the residents at the hospital that they would have a menorah that signified the correct day. The ride home to Philadelphia was very sweet.
Thank you, Alan. Our next segment focuses on a different December event, the winter solstice. As the shortest day of the year approaches, we may not be feeling any love toward the dark and cold it represents. These 2 poems, however, remind us of the beauty of nature and some of the historical celebrations of the season. Susan, our library director, will be reading them for us, and here she is.
Thank you, Craig. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out to join us today. Before I start, can we give a hand to our events team for the beautiful decorations in the Great Hall? Isn't it beautiful out here? They do such a lovely job each year, so I want to thank them for that. Well, as Craig said, I am sharing 2 poems about the winter solstice, and the first one is The World by Jennifer Chang. One winter I lived north, alone and effortless, dreaming myself into the past. Perhaps, I thought, words could replenish privacy. Outside, a red bicycle froze into form, made the world falser in its white austerity. So much happens after harvest, the moon performing novelty, slaughter, snow. 1 hour the same as the next, I held my hands or held the snow. I was like sculpture, forgetting or perhaps remembering everything. Red wings in the snow, red thoughts ablaze in the war I was having with myself again. Everything I hate about the world, I hate about myself. even now writing as if this were a law of nature. Say there were deer fleet in the snow, walking out the cold, and more ginkgos bare in the beggar's grove. Say I was not the only one who saw or heard the trees, their diffidence greater than my noise. Perhaps the future is a tiny flame I'll nick from a candle. First I'm burning, then numb. Why must every winter grow colder and more sure? And before I begin the second poem, I will do a little plug for our winter reading program. The poster is right behind me. Thank you for the grand gesture, ladies back there. Our winter reading program is Where We Come From. It will start in January, and it's a great way to spend those cold, dark hours of the winter curled up with a good book. Sounds good to me. So the next poem is called The Shortest Day by Susan Cooper. So the shortest day came and the year died, and everywhere down the centuries of the snow-white world came people singing, dancing to drive the dark away. They lighted candles in the winter trees. They hung their homes with evergreen. They burned beseeching fires all night long to keep the year alive. And when the New Year's sunshine blazed awake, they shouted, reveling. Through the frosty ages, you can hear them echoing behind us. Listen. All the long echoes sing the same delight. This shortest day, as promise wakens in the sleeping land, they carol, feast, give thanks, and dearly love their friends and hope for peace. And so do we, here, now, this year and every year, welcome Yule. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you to Susan for making time today to read that for us. And we have a special treat now. One of our librarians, Meg, will be reading an original story that she wrote about her great-grandparents in the Appalachia area of Ohio. Meg will be accompanied by another librarian, Lisa, and Lisa will be providing a background fiddle tune composed by Jay Unger called Ashokan Farewell. Anyone familiar with Ken Burns' The Civil War, a documentary, will recognize the tune, I'm sure. Meg's story is called Christmas in Appalachia, and she will read it now.
Head down County Road 297 just outside Warsaw, Ohio, and you will find the remnants of my great-grandparents' farm. When I was a kid, their old farmhouse was my playground with its coal-burning stove, outhouse, and bevy of animals. The bejeweled peacock strutting through their yard was exotic and quixotic. And nearly 40 years later, the jury's still out on what's worse, using the outhouse in the heat of summer or in the depths of winter. Both were memorable, neither were fun. Despite the backwoods bathroom accommodations, I loved visiting my great-grandparents, George and Mildred Haynes, whenever I could. Their home was ordinary yet picturesque, surrounded by rural Appalachia. Mom, great-grandma, and I would often sit on their front porch swing, enjoying the serenity and talk. Mom would push us gently back and forth with her feet as she unloaded her troubles to the grandmother she revered. I still remember the creak of the chain as the swing held our weight and the weight of our problems. Cocooned on that musty front porch with its braided rugs and painted floorboards, I never felt safer. My great-grandparents were Ohio-born and raised. They came from nothing and together created something. They raised 4 kids on a deep miner's paycheck and trading livestock at auctions. They grew their own food and made their own clothes. They couldn't or wouldn't allow a lot of luxuries. Anything from a catalog was too much and not to be afforded. Even after they discovered black gold on their property when I was 8, the only purchase they allowed themselves was a new mobile home with indoor plumbing. They placed it across the road from the old farmhouse they had called home for 50-plus years. The mobile home still sits there where it was placed in 1987, an aluminum tribute to a modest life. Can you imagine being in your 70s, finding oil on your property, and buying a shiny new mobile home? Oh, the extravagance of my great-grandparents. Great-grandpa, who had used an outhouse his whole life, would still traipse across the road to use it. After a lifetime of going outside, he couldn't see why he needed to go inside. Even in the winter, he'd gear up and head over to the little wooden shed with a half moon on its door. Tucked behind a bush, you wouldn't know it was there unless you were looking for it, but he could find it in the dark. Finally, when he fell very ill, he considered to using the restroom indoors. I can only imagine the dismay it must have caused him. I especially remember going to see great-grandma and great-grandpa at Christmas time. I enjoyed it more after they got that indoor plumbing. Lawrence Welk would be playing on the television set, and great-grandpa would be surrounded by his holiday haul, nuts and hard candies and tins of popcorn. After 80 years of living and not visiting a dentist, he barely had a tooth in his mouth, but he managed to eat all his goodies. There would be a modest tree in the corner, short and squat. It was covered in big, fat, colorful bulbs. I don't remember any ornaments, and there were only a few packages underneath. Never ones to lean towards the extravagant, they were content with the simple things. Reading through the family history a few years back, I came across a letter my great-grandmother wrote when she was a child to Santa Claus. The letter made it into the Coshocton Morning Tribune. It was 1916, and great-grandma asked for a sewing kit and an orange. She also asked for a stove and washing machine. Since she was only 6 years old, I can't help but think they were for her own mother. The basic things she asked for helped me understand my precious great-grandmother a little more. Envisioning her as a small child requesting such simple things shined a light on the way she was raised. It really was a different world. In my own childhood, I don't recall getting a gift from my great-grandparents, maybe a $5 bill, maybe a small bag of candy. I know I never unwrapped anything at their house, but I was never disappointed or sad that I didn't get a gift. Even as a child, I recognized that their presence in my life was enough. Great-grandma's hugs and homemade noodles and great-grandpa's hearty laugh were the things I needed, not stuff. I had great-grandpa until I was 17 and great-grandma until I was 23. My mind travels back to those innocent days a lot, especially in our busy, stressful lives. What I wouldn't give to have another Christmas with my great-grandparents. All of us packed into their tiny living room, while Christmas carols played and we visited. Those memories have lasted me a lifetime, longer than any trinket or toy would have. And in the hustle and bustle of my family's busy lives, this is the gift I want to impart to my own children. Remember the smells, the sounds, grandparents and aunts, the cousins and gatherings, committed to memory. I think my great-grandparents would be proud of us for remembering to remember that Christmas on the farm was about presents, not presents. And isn't that gift enough? I'm sorry. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mary. You're going to make us all tear up here. Well, we had a letter in that story. We had a letter to Santa, and now I'm going to read a response from Santa In 1875, Susie Clemens and little sister wrote letters to Santa Claus, and while they didn't expect a response, they happened to receive one. I guess it helps that your father is Mark Twain. Here's a letter written from Santa, also known as Mark Twain, and I'll be reading this for you folks as long as I can. Uh-oh. Who took my papers? Well, I'm going to find my papers, and then I will read this at the end. But for now, we're going to bring up Melissa, who didn't want to go last. And her wish is granted. Look, it's a Christmas miracle.
This story is called The Latka Who Couldn't Stop Screaming, a Christmas Story. Lemony Snicket. This story ends in someone's mouth, but it begins in a tiny village more or less covered in snow. The snow had fallen during the long night, during which children had pressed their faces to the windows looking for a glimpse of a man who they suspected of bringing them wonderful gifts. But instead, they heard a terrible noise from a certain cottage in the neighboring arrondissement, a word which here means a place where something is being born. This cottage was already regarded with some suspicion, as it was the only place not decorated with flashing colored lights at this time of the year. The thing that was being born was a latke, a word which here means potato pancake. Latkes are a traditional part of the celebration of Hanukkah, a holiday commemorating a miraculous Jewish military victory. Nearly everything in this world is born screaming, and the latke was no exception, even though the latke wasn't conceived and born the way you and I were conceived and born, but instead was fashioned from grated potatoes, chopped onion, beaten eggs, and a dash or two of salt. Once these ingredients were properly mixed, the latke was slapped into a pan full of olive oil heated to a very high temperature, and this is when it began to scream. Ah! The latke was suffering so much that it leapt out of the hot pan and out the window of the cottage and began to run screaming down the boulevard. Ah! This may seem like unusual behavior for a potato pancake, but this is a Christmas story in which things tend to happen that would never occur in real life. The latke ran past a row of flashing colored lights, which hung from the rain gutters of a less suspicious cottage. "What's all the ruckus?" said the lights in unison. "We're the ones who are supposed to be dominating the neighborhood with our cheerful glow." "I was just thrown into a pan of boiling oil," the latke cried in reply. "Can you believe it?" "Yes," said the flashing colored lights, "but we can't imagine why." "Because I'm a latke," said the latke. "The olive oil reminds us of the oil used to rededicate the temple following the defeat of Antiochus at the hands of the Maccabees. The oil was only supposed to last for one night, but there was a miracle and it lasted for 8. Plus, frying makes my skin crispy and brown." "So you're basically hash browns," said the flashing colored lights. "Maybe you can be served alongside a Christmas ham." "I'm not hash browns," cried the latke. "I'm something completely different." "Ah!" The latke rounded the corner and found itself face to face with a candy cane, which wrinkled its red and white nose at the latke in distaste. "I'm trying to sprinkle the night air with my peppermint scent," the candy cane said. "Your mouth-watering smell, not to mention all that yelping, is spoiling the effect." "My mouth-watering smell is part of the cozy feeling of Hanukkah," the latke replied. "It reminds us that things are better now than they were in 175 BCE, when my people were not allowed to practice their religion. In order to study the Talmud, they had to hide out in caves, and when they heard Greek soldiers approach, they pretended they were gambling with a small spinning top called a dreidel." "Sort of like Joseph and Mary hiding out in the manger," said the candy cane. "Someone should write a Christmas carol about you." I'm not part of Christmas, cried the Latka. It's a totally different thing. Ah! The screams of the Latka grew quieter and quieter as the pancake ran out of the village into the surrounding forest. Its utter fury was unabated, a phrase which here means the Latka was still very annoyed at the objects to whom it had spoken, but it was quite tired. So it decided to rest for a few minutes beneath the branches of a little pine tree. The pine tree was napping, but woke up at the sound of an object plopping down at its feet. Are you a present? The pine tree asked. Presents are pretty much the only thing allowed to sit beneath me during this time of year. The Latka sighed. Presents aren't really a big part of Hanukkah, it said in a voice hoarse from screaming. There's nothing wrong with giving gifts to loved ones, of course, but it's more important to light the candles for 8 consecutive nights to commemorate the miracle in the temple and the miracle of victory, even though you are thoroughly outnumbered, so you shouldn't give up hope. Plus, Santa Claus, said the pine tree. The Latka was too exhausted to scream. Santa Claus has nothing to do with it, the Latka said. Christmas and Hanukkah are completely different things. But different things can often blend together, said the pine tree. Let me tell you a funny story about pagan rituals. But before the pine tree could begin its story, a family came trooping through the snow, searching the forest carefully. We shouldn't have waited until the last minute to get ready for the holiday, said the father in the family, who was holding an axe. We'll never find a good one. You shouldn't give up hope, said the mother, and pointed at the pine tree. Look, it's perfect, said the daughter. Beautiful, agreed the son. Such a marvelous shape, said the mother. And its skin looks so crispy, said the father, and he reached down and scooped up the latke from the snow. We'll need to reheat it, of course, but this will be perfect for Hanukkah dinner, with a topping of applesauce, sour cream, or even jam. I'll refly it in oil, said the mother, to remind us of the rededication of the temple. And the triumph of the Maccabees over Antiochus, added the daughter. After hiding in caves all that time, the son chimed in. The father smiled down at the latke in his mitten, and then stared curiously at his other hand. What was I thinking bringing this axe, he said to himself. The family strolled back to the village, walking past all the cottages with flashing colored lights and smiling politely at the candy canes until they reached their own home. The family carried the latke into their own home, which was warm and cozy, and sat down at a table which was lit with the flickering candles of a menorah, or Hanukkah, which is a branched candelabra designed specifically for the holiday. It is very frustrating not to be understood in this world. If you say one thing and keep being told that you mean something else, it can make you want to scream. But somewhere in the world, there is a place for all of us, whether you are an electric form of decoration, a peppermint-scented sweet, a source of timber, or a potato pancake. On a cold, snowy night, everyone and everything should be welcome somewhere, and the latke was welcomed into a home full of people who understood what a latke is and how it fits into its particular holiday. And then they ate it. Ah! The end.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And to close us out here, I have A Letter from Santa Claus by Mark Twain. Palace of St. Nicholas in the Moon, Christmas morning. My dear Susie Clemens, I have received and read all the letters which you and your little sister have written me. I can read your and your baby sister's jagged and fantastic marks without any trouble at all. But I had trouble with those letters which you dictated to your mother and the nurses, for I am a foreigner and cannot read English writing well. You will find that I made no mistakes about the things which you and the baby ordered in your own letters. I went down your chimney at midnight when you were asleep and delivered them all myself, and kissed both of you too. But there were 1 or 2 small orders which I could not fill because we ran out of stock. There was a word or two in your mamma's letter which I took to be a trunk full of doll's clothes. Is that it? I will call at your kitchen door about 9 o'clock this morning to inquire. But I must not see anybody, and I must not speak to anybody but you. When the kitchen doorbell rings, George must be blindfolded and sent to the door. You must tell George he must walk on tiptoe and not speak, otherwise he will die someday. Then you must go up to the nursery and stand on a chair or the nurse's bed and put your ear to the speaking tube that leads down to the kitchen, and when I whistle through it, you must speak in the tube and say, "Welcome, Santa Claus." Then I will ask whether it was a trunk you ordered or not. If you say it was, I shall ask you what color you want the trunk to be, and then you must tell me every single thing in detail which you want the trunk to contain. Then when I say, "Goodbye and a Merry Christmas to my little Susie Clemens," you must say, "Goodbye, good old Santa Claus, I thank you very much." Then you must go down into the library and make George close all the doors that open into the main hall, and everybody must keep still for a little while. I will go to the moon and get those things, and in a few minutes I will come down the chimney that belongs to the fireplace that is in the hall, if it is a trunk you want, because I couldn't get such a thing as a trunk down the nursery chimney, you know. If I should leave any snow in the hall, you must tell George to sweep it into the fireplace, for I haven't time to do such things. George must not use a broom, but a rag, else he will die someday. If my boot should leave a stain on the marble, George must not wholly stone it away. Leave it there always in memory of my visit, and whenever you look at it or show it to anybody, you must let it remind you to be a good little girl. Whenever you are naughty and someone points to that mark which your good old Santa Claus's boot made on the marble, what will you say, little sweetheart? And then he signed it, "Your loving Santa Claus. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays." Well, thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed the food and the readings, and special thanks to all the staff members who graciously offered to share their talents and time with us today. Happy Holidays.
John.